Well, I finished my 53 weeks of undergraduate pilot training at Laredo Air Force Base, and I graduated. I was so thrilled about that and so happy that I had made it through and accomplished something else in life that a lot of people don't get to do. And had one little incident that happened just about a week before we were supposed to graduate. We were just out flying solo missions where you just go out in a specific area that you were supposed to stay in at a certain altitude. We had to give us about 5,000 feet up and down in about a 10 square mile radius just to go around and fly and have a good time, get some hours and get more comfortable in the aircraft. And so I took off and went out, and I was doing my little maneuvers and whisking through the clouds and just enjoying a nice, beautiful day in South Texas. And all of a sudden, I realized that I had missed the window to come back and land. The way they had this set up was the T-37s had 30 minutes that they could take off and land, and then the T-38s that I was in had 30 minutes to take off and land. And normally 30 minutes was about all you had enough fuel to do, especially if you were doing some more aggressive maneuvers and burning extra fuel. Well, I hadn't been burning extra fuel, but I had still used up quite a bit. And I said, well, if I go back now, they're going to have to shut off the T-37s from landing just to allow me to land, because our aircraft flew a lot faster than the T-37, so they couldn't have both of us in the pattern at the same time. So I said, well, I'm just going to stay up here and I'm going to pull back on the throttle. I'm going to conserve my fuel, and then I'll be the first one in the window when it opens back up. I had about 22, 21 minutes or something like that left. And so I did, and I just cruised around, and of course the fuel kept going down, but I was being as conservative as I could not to run out of fuel. And because if you run out of fuel, you have two choices. One of them is to crash with the plane. The other one is to eject and open your parachute and float down somewhere in the South Texas desert and hope they'll come pick you up. And then you'll have all kinds of problems filling out papers and explaining why you didn't bring that $1.5 million airplane back. So I, with all those thoughts running through my head, I had about 5 minutes before my window to land came back up. So I left my area and I got down to close to the base, and I called tower and requested permission to enter the pattern and for landing, and they gave me the approval. So I flew on around and got flaps down, got the gear down, landed, good landing, no problems. And said, man, I've made it. And so I taxied back to the ramp, and I shut the engine off and grabbed my helmet and my bag and headed back into operations, thinking, well, I did it. I escaped. And so I went in the operations room there, and where a bunch of us sitting around, everybody studying their books or doing something. And here comes this crew chief for one of the T-38s come charging in the room, yelling and screaming and cussing, and he said, who in the world brought that T-38 back in? And nobody looked up. Nobody acknowledged that the guy was in the room. If everybody would have looked over, the innocent ones, and then they'd have known I didn't look up, they'd known it was me. But they didn't. Everybody just kept their face in the book, and nobody said a word. And so he cussed for another couple of minutes, and then he walked out. And I said, well, he's probably going to go turn me in, and then they'll come find me. Well, lo and behold, never another word was said. So I escaped getting the butt chewing out, and maybe worse, but I got it back, but it was low on fuel. Have to say that. About a week later, they gave us a choice of what aircraft we wanted to fly after we finished at Laredo, and what location that we wanted to go. Well, me being a homeboy, I wanted to go back somewhere near Fort Worth, be near my parents and Nellie Jean's family and everything. So I put down first Carswell, and I think they were mainly flying B-52s at the time, and I wasn't really looking forward to that much because I'd heard so many bad things about the B-52. And my second choice was KC135s at Altus Air Force Base, Oklahoma. And I said, that's only 3.5 hours away from home. And I said, really, I'd probably rather prefer to fly that aircraft because it was very similar to what all the airlines were flying at the time. And I said, I want to be, possibly an airline pilot later on. So I picked Altus and KC-135s as my second choice, and I got it. And so I was very, very happy about that. So headed off to training graduate training, pilot training, and that was at Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California, which is about a 2-hour drive in central California, due east of San Francisco. Nellie Jean, she had been raised in Palo Alto, California, and so she had a few relatives still there, and so that was nice to be able to go somewhere where we had at least somebody we knew around there. They gave me actually 6 weeks from pilot training to get to California. I had 30 days of leave accrued and about 10 days of travel time to get there. And I'd never had 6 weeks off since I was 12, 13 years old, so I thought that was wonderful. Of course, being a lowly second lieutenant, even though I was on flight pay, I was making like $525 a month or something like that. So we decided we would buy a tent and a couple sleeping bags and camp on the way out there. And of course, Debbie was only 6 weeks old at the time, but we thought, we'll be able to keep her warm and happy, and so that's what we did. We went up to Fort Worth and spent a few days with Mom and Dad, and kind of got the car repacked and organized to head west. And then we took off and we went up through Panhandle of West Texas and into Colorado, and we got up to Colorado Springs and spent a few hours there looking at the sights, because I had never seen the stuff out there, and it's pretty amazing. And then we got up to Rocky Mountain National Park, and we spent a couple of nights there, and we didn't realize how cold it would be, but we were 10,000 feet in the air. Even though it was August, it was cold, but we sandwiched Debbie in between us to keep her warm, and we managed not to get frostbite or anything, and survived that. But then we went on up to Sheridan, Wyoming, where Nellie Jean had some relatives. She had some cousins, and she had an aunt that she was pretty close with, Aunt Nellie. In fact, she was named after her. Really nice old lady that very easygoing and cordial, and very friendly to me, and to Nellie Jean too. And we stayed there probably for 4 or 5 days, and then we headed on west out and went to Oregon, and didn't get into Washington State, but we got to the Pacific coast, and then we headed south on Highway 1 and saw some really beautiful sights, and got to see part of the world that I don't remember ever seeing before. And we drove on down to Merced and found us an apartment and got moved in. And then my school started, and of course my training was not to be a pilot in a 135, but to be a co-pilot. Well, a co-pilot's job was pretty simple and easy and straightforward, which I'm glad of that. But I got to raise the gear, I got to lower the gear, of course, at the pilot's command, and I also got to raise and lower the flaps when the pilot told me to do that. My main job to learn was the fuel distribution in the plane. The KC135, which was a Boeing 707 without seats in it, weighed 100,000 pounds, the basic aircraft, and we could put 200,000 pounds of fuel on that plane. The job was to manage that 200,000 pounds of fuel so that we had enough to offload to all the aircraft we were refueling, and also enough left for us to burn in our engines and get back to the base we wanted to go to. The main thing was to keep the center of gravity right, and we had this big panel between the pilot and the co-pilot, and so I was constantly turning the pump on this tank and that tank. There were 7 different tanks in the aircraft, 3 of them in the main body and 2 in each wing. So we got to manage the fuel from that. You could pump fuel to the aircraft engines or offload in nearly every tank. So we learned all of that and finished all that. And when we had weekends off, a couple, 3 times, we drove over to San Francisco. Nellie Jean was raised in Palo Alto, California, which is right south of San Francisco. And we got to meet an aunt and an uncle she had over there. The unique thing about the uncle, his name was Ralph, was that he owned a Rolls Royce. It was like a 6-7-year-old Rolls Royce, but that's something he'd always wanted to own, and so he found one used and he bought it. And he was showing that to me. He says, "Hey, would you like to drive it?" And I go, "Yeah, this is probably the only chance I will ever have to drive a Rolls Royce." And so we got in it, and off we went down the freeways here and there. And when they say that all you can hear in one of those in the inside of the car when you're driving is the clock, and that's a true statement, because you could barely hear the clock, but you couldn't hear any noise from outside. The thing was really well built and tight. So that was a thrill. I graduated from pilot training and qualified as a co-pilot in the KC135, and they designated that the A model because it was the first one they came out with. And so we packed up, and our assignment was Altus, Oklahoma. And like I say, that was my second choice, and we were only 3 hours or so away from Fort Worth, so I thought this would be nice. And so we took off, and one of the things that Mom and Dad had taught me as we were growing up and moving around a lot was, if you ever go across a really, really hot desert, which Southern California and Arizona have one of those, is drive at night, because it's so hot, your car engine will run cooler and you'll be cooler, and so it's just a better way more comfortable way to travel. And so we took off at night. It was like almost dark when we took off, and started driving. And of course, after it got dark, and about 10 o'clock, Debbie and Nellie Jean both fell asleep, and I'm driving across this desert, headed straight east on I-10. And I looked up, and I saw a unidentified flying object. And, a lot of people think those things are made up. I believed that until I actually saw one. And what this was, it was a white light, and it just appeared from the far distance, and it moved across the sky until it was about 10 o'clock high straight in front of me, and it stopped. And I could tell it wasn't close to the ground, but I couldn't tell how far out in the sky that it was. But it hovered there for about 30 seconds, and then it moved away rapidly. I'm talking thousands of miles an hour based on the knowledge I had learned in pilot training about how moving objects appear. And it stopped, and it moved back up to almost where it was the first time. And it stopped, and it just hovered there. And it was just not a real bright light, but a light bright enough that it didn't cause a shadow, but you could see it. And it hovered there for another 30 seconds or so, and then it took back off east at a rapid rate. I'm talking thousands of miles an hour from my perspective, and disappeared. And of course, about that time when the thing is there, I'm trying to wake Nellie Jean up to say, "Hey, watch this thing." And of course, she woke up too late to see it, so naturally she thought I imagined it, but I didn't, and I still to this day say that I've seen a UFO. Anyway, that was the only excitement we had on that trip going to Altus. So we arrived at Altus, and fortunately for us, we were able to move directly into base housing, and that was pretty nice housing. I mean, we had, it was a 3-bedroom house, a 2-bathroom, small yard. But very well maintained and kept, and so we moved in there, and I reported to duty. I showed up at the 11th Air Refueling Squadron headquarters, and this colonel that was there, he greeted me. He said he was a squadron commander and welcome to the squadron, and that they're glad that I was becoming part of the 11th ARS, and he was going to give me my assignment, what crew I was going to be on. Well, Altus had some transport aircraft there, but they had, their primary purpose was the 11th Air Refueling Squadron, KC135s. And I don't know exactly how many planes we had. I think it was about 20 aircraft, but we had 26 crews. And the crews were numbered based on seniority and ability, supposedly. The colonel said that he'd heard some good things about me. I don't know where in the world he heard them, but I'm glad he did. But he said that he was going to assign me to crew S101. Well, like I say, there was 26 crews, so the crews were numbered S101 all the way to S126. And he said the 101 crew is our standardization and evaluation crew. Those are the people that are responsible for training and keeping proficient all of the other crew members, the pilots, the co-pilots, the navigators, and the boom operators. And so I said, wow, that's a great assignment. I said, thank you for doing that. And I was very fortunate because I did have probably the best pilot in the entire base. He was a Major Garrison. And Major Garrison was a big old boy, about 6'2", slow walking, slow talking Southern boy. But everything he said had importance. So everybody listened when he said something. My navigator was a guy by the name of Andrew Lebowski. And Andrew was a captain, senior captain, and he had come from the coal mines of Pennsylvania. And when somebody asked him, says, well, how did you become a navigator in the Air Force? And he said, because my only other choice was working in a coal mine in Pennsylvania, and I knew I didn't want to do that. But he was really a nice guy, easy to get along with, a little finicky in particular about certain sanitation things, like he would refuse to drink out of the top of a beer can or a soda can because he said there's germs all over it and you can't get them off. And he was addicted to Alka-Seltzer. We'd come back from a flight every time, and at the time they had vending machines in the debriefing room at the squadron office that we were at, and they had a beer vending machine. For a quarter, you get a beer. Of course, we'd all drink a beer when we get back, and Andy, he'd always forget to bring a cup with him, so he'd have to just pour the beer out of the can into his mouth without the lid touching his lips. So that was always kind of funny. And then my boom operator was a Master Sergeant Reed, and he was a good guy too. He was not overly friendly. He was the only enlisted man on the crew, but he seemed to fit in well. We didn't have any issues or problems with somebody pulling rank on him or anything like that. But he was just a nice guy to work with. Of course, we all worked as a team. It was a 4-man crew, and it took all 4 of us to get everything done. So anyway, they assigned us to that crew, and first thing we did was naturally go on alert. Now, the way SAC had everything arranged when it comes to your assignments, you would pull alert 7 days straight. You would go on alert like on a Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. And the crew that was replacing you, they'd get off alert, so they would turn their airplane over to us and all the paperwork that we needed to have to show we were responsible for the plane. And then we would stay at this bunker at the end of the runway, about 50 yards away from our aircraft, for 7 straight days, 24 hours a day. We could occasionally maybe slip away to the BX or somewhere like that, but generally you stayed real close to the base because you had to respond. They had a klaxon that was the alert bell would go off, and you had exactly 5 minutes to get from wherever you were at doing whatever you were doing to get out and be on that airplane ready for the next order, which was either start your engines and take off and go to war, or this is just a practice, go back inside, And so we had a lot of alerts. We'd have average probably 2, maybe 3 a week, and sometimes you'd have none, sometimes you'd have 6. You never knew night or day, weekend, whatever, that when you were going to have one. But if you didn't respond in the time required, all hell broke loose on you. So you didn't want to have that happen to you. So we went on alert for 7 days. The good part was when you get off alert the following Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, they had nothing scheduled for you until most likely the next Monday. So you'd have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, and then you would report to duty, and you might, next Monday or Tuesday, you might have a 5-6 hour flight, and you might have another flight a couple days later, and then you might go back on alert the following Friday because they alternated the alert cycle Wednesdays and Fridays. So if you went on a Friday morning, then you got off the following Friday morning, and then you'd have off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and they wouldn't plan anything for you till Tuesday. So it was nice. I mean, it was tough, like I say, being in that bunker 24 hours a day, but at the same time, when you got your time off, you could, we would go to Fort Worth or we'd go different places or just sit at home and not have anything to do. So it kind of offset the timing fairly well.